Skonson production.
Ciao, zdravo, wagwan, everybody, Skonson family. You've now tuned in for part 3 of Težina lanaca.
Big up to everybody.
So let's see what the final 45 minutes has got in store. Let's go.
A coal mine from the Serbs. Prior to the bombings, Western investors already had their eyes riveted on the massive Trepča mining complex, which constitutes the most valuable piece of real estate in the Balkans, worth at least $5 billion. The Trepča complex not only includes copper and large reserves of zinc, but also cadmium, gold, and silver. The International Crisis Group, a think tank supported by financier George Soros, issued a paper on Trepča making sense of the labyrinth, which told UNMIK to take over the Trepča mining complex from the Serbs as quickly as possible, and that handing Trepča over to the Kosovars is ruled out. And in August 2000, UNMIK head Bernard Kouchner sent in heavily armed peacekeepers wearing surgical masks against toxic smoke to occupy the mine. This was done on the pretense that it was creating an environmental hazard through extensive air pollution. Of course, a healthy environment has always been a top priority of the West in Yugoslavia, even during the bombing campaign nicknamed Merciful Angel.
After NATO used depleted uranium munitions here during the 1999 bombing, military experts from Belgrade have registered an increased radiation level. Dr. Srblak was among the first to raise the alarm.
There is no other place in the modern world where so many people, and so many young people, die from cancer.
In this animal hospital in the south of Serbia, there is evidence of something going wrong.
And as it takes billions of years for uranium to decay, the shadow of the ghost of the Merciful Angel will hang over the region virtually forever.
See, that's perfectly fine. Meanwhile, the United Nations had handed over the management of the entire Trepča mining complex to Western Consortium. With a stake in the Trepča deal was Morrison Knudsen International. The new conglomerate was the Washington Group, one of the world's most powerful engineering and construction firms, as well as a major defense contractor in the US. Are any of the Western politicians, businessmen, or lobbyists facing charges for stealing from the Yugoslav people? For crimes against the people of the former Yugoslavia? Nope. Not a single one of them. Instead, to escape any persecution, they set up a tribunal in The Hague, the Netherlands, to try the Yugoslav people involved in the war.
The Hague Tribunal was founded in 1993 on the basis of the Security Council resolution rather than General Assembly resolution, which means that it is an ad hoc body created on the basis of political rather than legal principles.
When you're creating a colony, you only lock up the dissidents. Back in Belgrade, Slobo, who was declared the man of peace in 1995 when he handed over Bosnia to the West, after he was being stubborn about doing the same for Kosovo, got indicted for war crimes.
I think every major world leader knows that if they don't go along with the system, they're likely to be taken out one way or another.
After an extensive anti-Slobo campaign readily financed by Western wallets,
the EU and the United States have spent millions of euros in equipping opposition movements inside Yugoslavia with the necessary resources to fight an election campaign.
Slobo lost the elections in September of 2000, but wouldn't yield to his opponent, Vojislav Koštunica. Vojo decided that enough was enough.
Victory, victory, shouted the crowd. Slobodan, Slobodan, save Serbia and kill yourself, cried others.
Čestitam gospodinu Koštunici na izbornoj pobedi.
Slobo fell. But what next? The politicians were all back to quarreling over insignificant nonsense in the hottest TV reality show, aka the Serbian National Assembly.
Poslanici su se duboko u noć optuživali međusobno, a ponekad i psovali.
Tvrdeći da je poslanicima njegove stranke neko iz DS-a psovao majku, Aleksandar Vučić više puta je tražio od Borke Vučić da interveniše.
Ja sam se spremio da dam skroman doprinos tom putu u Evropu, jer znam šta vas tamo čeka, za razliku od nekih koji su u ovoj skupštini skidali kulahopke. Gospodine ministre, ja ću da vam poklonim jedan deo odeće koji će vam biti potreban za Evropu.
A još gore od Čekuovog i Tačijevog nadvojvode i Solaninog kaplara Borisa Tadića bi bilo da podržite, zamislite, za predsjednika vlade Vojvodu od Meridian banke od 11 miliona evra.
Ja bih volao da mi ljudi ovdje iz radikalne stranke kažu bravo Đeliću, to Božo, pokaži svima kako Srbin može da bude uspješan u financijama. Božo, to majstore, pokaži svima, mi smo ponosni na tebe. Jedan Vojvoda od financija Božidar Dejić, svaka čast.
Evo, ovo je druga cipela koja će ući u istoriju, a siguran sam da će danas obići i dobar deo sveta.
Bacanje cipela do sada nije zabeleženo u parlamentu, ali je bilo polivanja vodom i iznošenje iz sale.
Chaos, bro.
Instead of focusing on the really important things, they allowed the further fragmentation of Yugoslavia. In 2003, the name Yugoslavia officially ceased to exist, thanks to the genius prescription of Javier Solana.
Jer to onaj čuveni doktor Solana?
Jeste, čuveni natolog, poepsolog I bombardolog.
However, one man didn't want to give up his country and its system so easily. Blaško Gabrić, from my hometown of Subotica, decided to make a radical move.
Yugoslavian socialism was much better socialism than any other socialism, like comparing with Russians or comparing with Chinese. We had heaven. If you can imagine a heaven in the earth, that was Yugoslavia.
Blaško explains who took away his piece of heaven.
The Western world, they want to talk, you will go to heaven when you die. They don't want afford you a heaven when you are alive.
So he turned his property of 15 hectares into a new, fourth Yugoslavia.
If they destroy your factory, if they put everything on private, whatever we had, we don't have anymore, how you call that?
The West said this was democracy.
We have a very nice joke when Muslim people ask the priest, how can he explain democracy to them, to be capable to understand? So, well, very simple, I can explain that to you. See, when I go in the top on minaret, and you are down below me, and I piss on you guys, even you can piss on me too. That's democracy.
Well, jokes aside, taking away Yugoslavia's name had a more malevolent motive.
Yeah, when they take Yugoslavia away, when they call Serbia and Montenegro, West promised to the Montenegro, leave the Serbia alone.
Come 2006, after a controversial referendum, Montenegro became the newest country of the world.
55.4% of citizens voted for independence of Montenegro.
However, another part of the former Yugoslavia still wanted that title. You guessed it, Kosovo. In the same year, negotiations began between the Belgrade government and the Albanian minority over the status of Kosovo. However, the so-called negotiations were a farce from the beginning, as almost all the Western powers were promising Kosovo independence regardless of the negotiations.
Sooner rather than later, you got to say enough's enough. Kosovo's independent. And that's the position we've taken. The people of Kosovo need to know that it is a solid, firm position. And even though there's diplomacy and talks, but if it's apparent that that's not going to happen in a relatively quick period of time, in my judgment, we need to put forward the resolution.
Think about it. If you had some of the world's largest powers telling you that you can get whatever you want, why the hell would you settle for any less and try to reach a compromise? As anticipated, the talks broke down and Kosovo unilaterally declared independence.
It has been an honor to welcome the President and Prime Minister of an independent Kosovo to the Oval Office. I'm proud you all are here. I welcome you. I'm a strong supporter of Kosovo's independence.
Oh yeah, we've seen this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was in the
Beogradsky
syndicate.
I pledge that the United States would continue to work.
And I think it was like that man who done that. He died later on of cancer or something.
Is it?
Yeah, something like that.
With those nations that have not recognized an independent Kosovo to convince them to do so as quickly as possible.
Contrary to what Bush had hoped, the majority of the world countries didn't recognize Kosovo, and it didn't even become a UN member state. Thus, Kosovo failed to become a country. What was absurd in this story is that the Albanian minority, which in all fairness did suffer greatly throughout the 1990s, thought that they actually got independence in 2008.
Big day for Kosovo people, Albanians, yeah.
How do you feel?
Oh, I am feeling very, very good. This is like a dream.
As a Serb, I feel sorry for the Albanians because they've been duped even more than we have. They think they have an independent state. Kosovo is a U.S. military base. It happens to have some local color called Albanians, some local foliage like leaves on the trees.
Institucionet e popullit Kosovës do të përulet për jetë me respektin më të lartë për ju zoti president dhe Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës dhe popullin amerikan.
But whether they could decide to do something not consistent with U.S. wishes, impossible.
Do you think the Kosovo government could do anything without the Americans agreeing with it?
No. Ne bi verovao da će moći nešto uraditi bez Amerikanca, Engleza, Nemaca, sile, Francuske i te stvari.
Da li smatrate da kosovska vlada može da donese neke odluke koje nisu u saglasnosti sa Amerikancima, recimo?
Ne može.
Zbog čega?
Ne može. Amerika je Amerika. Ne može.
Ne verujem.
We listen Americans. America, there are 50 countries, states, yeah. So why Kosovo not be a part of America?
You would support that?
Yes, why not? They are just administrating everything in Kosovo.
The Americans are in control?
Yeah, they are operating everything in Kosovo.
The Americans are in control?
Yeah, they are pretty much in control here.
We are not independent from European Union and from America.
The formal channel whereby the international missions in Kosovo have the absolute power over all walks of political and economical life in Kosovo are represented through the international civilian representative, who has the right to expel any elected official or annul any laws that are passed by the Assembly of Kosovo. At the same time, there is an informal channel whereby the international community meddles within politics and economics in Kosovo through the ambassadors of the powerful countries that have been seen or presented itself as sponsors of the independence of Kosovo. The wishes of these ambassadors are kind of like orders to the Kosovo's politicians. Kosovo still remains a colony and the life or the standard of living in Kosovo.
On the other hand, the people of Serbia's other province were unaware of what was being prepared for them. Smack dab in the middle of the Pannonian Plain, Vojvodina has always been an attractive chunk of real estate exploited for its fertile farmland. After Kosovo's declaration of independence, the West turned their sights northward. Towards the end of 2009, in an article published in The Economist, the situation in Serbia's northern province was described as being on the thin end of a wedge leading to Vojvodina's independence. After all, Kosovo and Vojvodina had equally extensive autonomy.
Magazin Economist je ozbiljan magazin i utoliko ta informacija je onespokojavajuća.
And why did nobody take action? What's with the silence? You see, there's a way to get people to do something in Serbia, or any other Yugoslav country for that matter. Just tell them it's another step towards bringing them closer to the European Union.
Guys, what's the name of this song?
The EU, a unique political and economic partnership of European countries, provides states with an exchange of goods, people, and ideas on a market that includes around 1 billion inhabitants. Apart from the official definition, there's more to it than the eye can see.
The European Union is a project of the elite class of Europe that denies the value of the genuine heritage of European civilization and seeks to replace it with politically correct dictate of the ideology of postmodernism and post-nationalism.
First, your country has to open its market to EU products and sell all its banks, which is like giving away your queen and rook in a game of chess. Then your country's domestic industry, agriculture, and money market goes bust, which allows foreign companies to get a good purchase price on your most valuable assets. If we continue the chess analogy, your government is playing as a beginner against the EU, who is 10 steps ahead of you. You may know how to move the figures, but your opponent knows how to draw you to thin ice and get what he wants. Checkmate. In the Czech Republic, the EU forced the sugar industry to close their factories because the EU had too much sugar it was importing from Cuba that made them bigger profit. Instead, the Czechs got a little gift from the Germans, their dirty industry, which they couldn't keep in Germany due to the Kyoto Protocol. In Hungary, the people's vineyards were first destroyed by French dumping prices, which then caused the Hungarians to not be able to pay back their loans to the banks, and foreigners bought their property at low prices. This is why the most famous Hungarian vineyards, such as Tokaj, are owned by the English.
It's all corruption, bro. It's just corrupt bastards, bro.
Yeah.
From the top down.
There's no work, says this man, just poverty. The situation has become worse since the sugar factory nearby Serench closed down last year. 80 people from Mizozombor lost their jobs. The factory is being torn down.
I think you can see a pattern here.
These places, like the Balkans and the rest of Eastern Europe, were not supposed to be colleagues and equals in a brotherhood of nations, but rather they were supposed to be markets for Western industrial goods. They were supposed to be markets for cheap labor.
Nemačkog farmera da bi napravio puter košta $300 kilogram ili tona. Srpski proizvođač može da napravi puter za 200. Ali, pošto nemačka vlada daje subvenciju proizvođaču putera, taj puter košta $150. I taj puter je $50 jeftiniji nego srpski. I mi jednog dana dobijemo kompletnu lepezu uvežene poljoprivrednih roba, a naš seljak nema gde to da proda.
Bear in mind, it takes a while to join the EU.
12 godina mi treba potpuno da otvorimo vrata za robu iz Evropske unije, a oni izvoze robu koju subvencioniraju. I ona je jeftinija od naše proizvodnje. Mi nemamo pare da dajemo subvencije svojim poljoprivrednicima. Na taj način mi se od proizvođača poljoprivrednih proizvoda pretvaramo u uvoznika poljoprivrednih proizvoda. I na taj način oni gase našu poljoprivredu. Gase jednu po jednu granu.
You won't hear about these things in the media, though.
The European Union spends over 2 billion euros per year for its representation in the media. They sponsor shows on television, on radios. They sponsor programs and so on. They organize conferences, especially just for the journalists. It's a massive industry. You hardly ever hear criticism about the European Union from the journalists.
In Serbia, there has never been a true debate about the European Union, and any attempt to even initiate such a debate was condemned up front as anti-European.
Those who try to open such a debate are simply cut off.
Ja kad ovdje slušam, meni je jako smešno šta vi sve to kažete o Evropskoj uniji, pošto to je slovenski narod, pa i ja slušao 10 godina, ama baš bukvalno iste stvari, kod je to CIA štampala ili neko drugi. I pazite sad.
Pre nego što kažeš, mogu te pitam, koga ti je plata?
Ne, čekaj, mogu samo da, samo ako možeš da slušaš.
Ja ću kritikovati globalizam na sva uzma.
Dobro, ajde izvolite.
Gledaj, pazi, niko više u Sloveniji ne veruje u Evropsku uniju, taj san, a prošlo je par meseci, pošto će sad 50.000 ljudi da otpuste, jer sve tvornice, ne sve, se zatvaraju, sele se u Rumunsku, u Honduras, čovječe, gde je to? I u Kinu, razumeš?
Na sreću dolazi u Srbiju neki.
Ti pričaš o nekim partnerima iz Slovenije, gde se glavni direktori koji ovde ulažu u tu zemlju prebacivaju, hvalisaju kako koloniziraju Srbiju, ceo Balkan.
I remember that guy, the neoliberal guy from the party G17+, and he told me, yeah, but you are criticizing the European Union, but hey, you live in European Union, Slovenia is doing well in Europe. No, it just doesn't work like this. This is a standard propaganda, you understand? We are not better off because we are in European Union. It's vice versa. We are in European Union because we did better off than other, for example, former republics of Yugoslavia.
After the death of Yugoslavia, every single former Yugoslav republic wanted to become a member of the EU. Slovenia was the first to actually join in 2004, but wasn't dazzled much.
We are no more a country, we are just a region of European Union. Why do I claim that? We have no monetary policy. We have practically no fiscal policy because we are very much restricted with the rules of European Union or Euro area.
Are things better now that Slovenia is in the European Union?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think it's better.
No, I don't think so.
The prices all just doubled. Everything is more expensive than it used to be.
The clothes are more expensive. I voted no when we had the referendum for joining European Union.
Sve je pokradeno, ne zna se niko pije, niko plaća, litostroj, metalka, nema niti jednoga preduzeća koje ima 500 ljudi, a da dobro stoje.
If you are part of the European Union, also you are giving something into the common wallet of Europe.
A lot of social rights that we had in the past are now being shrinked.
I believe that, and that's my personal opinion, that European Union is more of a corporation than like a political establishment that secures human rights.
Da li je u Sloveniji bolje otkad je ušla u Evropsku uniju?
Da, mnogo bolje.
Zbog čega?
Pa, ima razloga mnogo.
Koji su razlozi?
Mnogo.
Da li je život bio bolji za vrijeme Jugoslavije?
Da, bio je bolji.
Slobodnije je bilo.
Tito je bog bogova.
Right across the street from Slovenia, Croatia was giving up enforcement of the ecological and fisheries protection zone towards EU states, as 1/3 of all Italian fishing activity came from that zone. It also flushed away its banking sector.
Hrvatska ima samo još jednu banku koja je u njenom vlasništvu. Bila je primorana sve banke prodati strancima. Hrvatski Telekom je prodan Deutsche Telekomu. Mi dalje ne znamo sadržaj tog ugovora.
On the other hand, people in Serbia find it hard to stop trusting everything that comes from the West, often readily believing their propaganda that the West really loves them, and that even when they're bombing Serbs, they're doing it for the Serbs' own good.
I think the situation that we're in today is the result of something that I call predatory capitalism. And it really got underway in the 70s when I was an economic hitman. We used predatory capitalism in the third world a lot. And the first principle is that the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs.
U Jugoslaviji su nuđeni vrlo povoljni krediti da mi uđemo u što veću kreditnu zaduženost. Ako ste ekonomski jaki, onda ste i vojno jaki. Onda ste jaki po svim pitanjima. Ali ako ste zaduženi i ako vaša ekonomija slabi, onda vi slabite na svim frontovima.
As Yugoslavia broke up, the federal debt was distributed between the successor states. At the end of the 2000s, the prosperity everyone was promised clearly kicked in. Montenegro, from a debt of $416 million, had acquired a debt of $4.7 billion. Macedonia had jumped from $890 million to $6.7 billion. Bosnia went from $2.1 billion to $16.5 billion. Serbia's debt increased from $5.5 billion to $38 billion. Slovenia from $2.6 billion to a shocking $56.3 billion. And
Chris.
in Croatia, the absolute debt-acquiring winner jumped from $4.6 billion to a dizzying $69 billion.
1988. 2 godine pre raspada Jugoslavije, Jugoslavija je dugovala 13,5 milijardi dolara i iz svetskih bankarskih krugova nam je rečeno da smo prezaduženi i da više ne možemo da dobijamo kredite. Danas isti taj prostor, podeljen u 6 državica, duguje 184 milijarde dolara i niko nam ne kaže da smo prezaduženi, nego nam još nude kredite.
Yugoslavs love to say how they lived off foreign debt during Tito's Yugoslavia, and now they don't?
Kako opljačkati jednu takvu zemlju? Ako vi kažete da hoćete da privatizujete nešto u jednoj zemlji gde su svi primali neke male platice i gde nisu mogli da imaju ni $1.000.000, znači niko od građana Jugoslavije nije mogao da kupi ni jednu fabriku u toj zemlji. Znači, te fabrike su mogle da kupi samo stranci.
Okay, so they were bought by foreigners. What's so bad about that?
Smederevsku železaru, da bi izgradili, uzeli smo kredite od međunarodnih finansijera od $600 miliona. I za $600 miliona smo je izgradili. a prodali smo je američkom US Steelu za $23 miliona. Toliko košta samo zemljište na kome se železara nalazi. Tako je urađeno sa svim kapitalnim objektima u ovoj zemlji.
On the other hand, here's one example of how they robbed the reduced Yugoslavia with loans. First, they enforced heavy sanctions.
Tada su oni od 92. zaračunavali redovne kamate, zatezne kamate i takozvane kaznene kamate. I naš dug se od 5,2 milijarde koje je pripadao Srbiji i Crnoj Gori popeo na 13,5 milijardi dolara. 2000. kad je srušen Milošević, postavljen je za potpredsjednika vlade zaduženog za financije Labus.
Miroljub Labus was, by the way, a member of the G17, those so-called pro-IMF experts.
Labus je došao i jednim perom potpisao da mi prihvatamo da platimo sve kamate, redovne, zatezne i kaznene za period od 8 godina, od 92. do 2000.
Literally burning the thing down to rubble.
I uveo tu Jugoslaviju u jedan potpuno dužničko ropstvo, jer smo mi platili 8,5 milijarde zapadu, a oni su nas blokirali, nismo mi njih blokirali.
In 2008, Croatia earned $9.3 billion from tourism, which amounts to some 20% of Croatia's overall GDP. And this would have been great had the money actually stayed in Croatia.
Sve hotele, najbolje hotele na Jadranskoj obali su kupili nemačke i austrijske kompanije.
Of those 9.3 billion, Croatia was left with small waiter salaries, wage taxes, the goods and services tax of 19%, and a handful of euros from restaurants, cafes, and private accommodation. While the profit went to Germany. With the macroeconomic stability at stake in all the republics, the IMF and World Bank step in to save the day. And how do they do it? Let's say the IMF and World Bank give you a loan of $300 million, to which you have to pay an interest of 5.5 to 7%. But the money doesn't go anywhere. No, it stays in big American or German banks, as well as the Republic's foreign exchange reserves, to which you get 2 to 2.5% interest. Then, those same banks, with essentially the Republic's money, give investment loans to the republics through different development funds, which again increases their debt that they can repay only with fresh new loans. Thus, the cycle continues.
Ne trebaš biti ekonomista, znači ti uzimaš dug
Trapped, bro.
Corruption at its finest.
Da bi vratio novi dug. To je kamata na kamatu, to je eksponencijalna funkcija, to je banalna stvar.
What does this mean to the people? Well, if we divide up every country's debt by its population, this is how much every citizen would have to pay. Yet many people still think that foreign factors want to help them.
Želi su uništiti, i to se uspješno nažalost radi, dosta dobro, vjera u vlastite mogućnosti, vlastite sposobnosti. Kaže, nije to samo za Hrvatsku, to se svugdje, po istom principu svugdje radi. Kao, ne možemo sami, moramo pomoć ovoga, pomoć onoga, kao neko će nam pomoći, pogotovo da će nam pomoći te svjetske banke ili takve strukture. To je jedna obmana, jedna laž, znači iz te laži treba izići van.
Foreign banks used the desperate state of the Yugoslav population for their own gains, sometimes by criminal means.
Hypo Alpe Adria banka, to je austrijska banka koja je prala prljavi novac sa Balkana kupujući nekretnine po Hrvatskoj, pa je onda ta banka bila prodana njemačkoj Bayerische Landesbank koja je na kraju bankrotirala i sad njemački porezni obveznici moraju platiti 3 milijarde eura za sanaciju te banke.
The dire situation was made worse by the world financial crisis, so Croatia looked at what else the country had a lot of that it could sell. That's right. Islands. In 2009, Britain's independent newspaper announced that Croatia wants to sell the Brijuni Islands, which is also a national park, and located on it, Tito's luxurious former residence.
Brijuni su vrlo atraktivni i u tom smislu su izabrani da budu taj jedan špic kojim se želi probiti, znači taj psihološki barijera u narodu da se odrekne svog teritorija doslovce, svojeg najljepšeg dijela teritorija ili jednog od najljepših.
Meanwhile, in the colony of Bosnia, the IMF added Article 7 to Bosnia's new constitution, drawn up in Dayton, Ohio.
The country was basically held by the bulls of the Germans, bro. Yeah. To the point where they had no choice. Literally, bruv. You saw them back in the 80s thanking Germany, bruv, right? And Germany were literally giving them loans and giving them money, and they didn't know that they had to pay it all back with added interest. And that's why they could be like, yeah, listen, see that island, I want it.
They decided that the governing board of the central bank shall consist of a governor appointed by the International Monetary Fund, and that the governor shall not be a citizen of Bosnia and Herzegovina or any neighboring state. Therefore, the government does not have control of its country's economy. But it wouldn't be fair to say that all the money invested in Bosnia was used to repay its loans. No, a lot of the money did go to the Bosnian people, except that it went to a very few Bosnian people. Very, very few. In fact, according to an anti-fraud unit that was set up by the Office of the High Representative, $1 billion disappeared from public funds and international aid projects from 1995 to 1999. Where did all this go, one might ask? Well, for example, in the town of Sanski Most, money went to a horse racing track rather than developing the economy or infrastructure. If you're gonna steal public and aid funds, you might as well go all out and gamble it too, right? The same mayor of this town also gave $450,000 provided by Saudi Arabia to his brother, so the guy can open a new bank. He also faces 358 charges of corruption. On the other hand, Montenegro relied heavily on cigarette smuggling to keep the country afloat during the war years. Its leaders, Bulatovic and Đukanović, claimed they never personally benefited from the smuggling. Which is really odd, considering that Prime Minister Đukanović was the 20th richest statesman in the world in 2010, more than 3 times richer than Nicolas Sarkozy and Barack Obama combined.
Milo Đukanović has been more successful than most in turning his entire country into a personal fiefdom operated on the basis of Cosa Nostra principles. In fact, I think his personal net worth is much greater than the one officially listed, that in reality he can claim to own everything there is in Montenegro.
Since these elites couldn't care less about anyone else, the people at the bottom of the food chain had to resort to desperate acts.
Vraćamo se domaćim temama. Svako skreće pažnju na sebe na svoj način. Setkerinci bi možda trebalo da se ugledaju na meštane žitišta koji podižu spomenik filmskom junaku Rokiju Balboji. Ne bi li tako skrenuli pažnju na probleme svog mesta, jedine nerazvijene opštine u Vojvodini?
44-year-old Samir was born in Bosnia, and he is convinced that under these layers of dirt is the largest pyramid in the world.
Many youths realized what was going on and started fighting against what their countries were being turned into.
Our band's name is Beogradski Sindikat, which would translate in English like Belgrade Union.
Belgrade Union is a Serbian rap band famous for its critical views towards society's elite and criminal elements.
Znam da ovde je stranje, al meni je do jaja, je bruka i sramota, koliko imam para, život ko na slici, al ne plaćam poreze, moj životni moto je, ima se, može se, pare su u Švici.
Boško Čirković from Belgrade Union explained why not many people were taking action against the injustice.
A lot of young Serbians and youth of the world just thinks about material stuff and going into the politics. They do it just to get more material stuff. If I was in the same room with the guys running this country, the main guy is my ex-high school psychology teacher, I would conduct the real revolution on them.
Ovo nimalo nije politički korektno, ni levo ni desno, već pravo mesto. Ovdje nemate kontrolu, to je masovna respekta. Zapitaj se dokle, kakav si to čovek, polizan i plašljiv, živiš bez slobode.
How that would turn out, I don't know. But some of us probably would not leave the room.
Bruv, of course, Beogradski Sindikat would have to be in this.
Yeah.
Because, bruv, they were the only group, yeah, that so far that I know of, I'm pretty sure there was others, but them in particular that were actually mentioning and talking about this in their music.
And you know what?
And it was, sorry to cut you, but it was through no government. There weren't no puppets played by governments or politicians or people with money, you know?
Trust me. And you know what? After this, I'm slamming on that song as well with that hard sample. I'm banging out that song. I have to. After watching something like this, watching so much corruption and injustices going on, you need to throw on some Beogradski Sindikat after this. I'm just cool. My inner is calling for it, bro.
Korupcija, teror, institucija, represija, ubija, mafija, murija, država hajdučija, kadija, sudija, a mi smo revolucija, to nije naša Srbija.
Down in Sarajevo, things weren't much different.
Mi potražujemo danas plate za 2003., 2004., 2005., 2006. i molim vas lijepo 2007. godinu.
Ovo je zemlja koja se zove Bosna i Hercegovina.
U ovoj zemlji se pljačka na sve strane.
I opet će najveću cijenu za to platiti građani ove zemlje.
Ne dam ostavku, neće ova vlada podnijeti ostavku. Neće iz 1000 razloga.
Država propada, a vladajući kleptomani se sve više bogate.
Sve trpi, šuti, bit će bolje, bit će bolje. Pa ovo je država za požaliti.
Dubioza Collective is a Sarajevo-based band with a similar message to the one Belgrade Union had.
As long as people think that their impact on democratic processes ends up when they put the ballot in a box, then nothing gonna change, because
I was shown this band actually by someone at an old workplace, and he was from Bulgaria.
That leaves 4 years gap to whoever is elected to do whatever he wants.
Jedna marka je za neke ljude, mi se ona imenu sad.
Nismo na ulici, nismo niko.
To nije spriječilo zastupnike da uredno primaju plaće u srazmjeri od 3 do 5.000 konvertibilnih maraka.
The ruling elites don't listen to anybody. That's the thing they learned the best, because they even ignore, mass protests.
Oni vrlo vješto koriste tu jeftinu priču nacionalizma i s njom zaluđuju mase kako bi se sve više i više bogatili. Protiv tih elita smo mi.
Sadly, the elite in power, even when the majority was against them, still didn't listen.
One of my very close and very trusted friends was at a dinner, a private dinner, at which the American ambassador Cameron Munter was present. That dinner was held between the election, in which the Radical Party, which is much more independence-oriented than the Democratic Party, had apparently won the election. They had the most votes of any party. And we were all expecting that, well, the people have spoken, there's been an election, the biggest party's going to form the government. And my friend asked Cameron Munter, well, Mr. Munter, it seems that your mission here has been a failure. The mission to bring Serbia under the imperial tutelage. He said, I wouldn't speak so soon. In fact, I'd watch the television tomorrow and see what the results of the meeting between Mr. Tadić and Mr. Dačić are.
Evropska unija pozdravila je dogovor koalicije okupljenih oko Tadićeve demokratske stranke i socijalista kao realnu šansu da Beograd dobije proevropsku vladu.
And as the government itself was formed by Washington, the policies and laws were also dictated from abroad.
The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is writing laws for the government of Serbia and telling them these are the laws we want you to pass.
Thus, the former Yugoslav countries started becoming NATO member states.
Do you know what it means to join NATO? You have to get rid of all your weapon systems which are domestically produced, domestically designed, domestically developed, designed for your terrain, to re-equip yourself with F-16s, F-18s, F-22s, at the cost of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars per plane. And your sons and daughters have to go and fight. And where do they want us to fight? They want us to put on the night vision goggles and go to Afghanistan and kill them dang ragheads who never did anything to us.
Profits and military gains were again being acquired from these economic and geopolitical colonies. The people were completely unaware of what was happening to them and thought that they were finally free and independent.
What happened to Yugoslavia could be considered like a classic example of colonization. It's sort of a new flavor, but it's still colonization.
Rather than trying to colonize the unsettled areas of the world, I mean, why not just create a mess and then fix it? Then you basically own a chunk of the world which was already developed and consuming.
They wanted a Yugoslavia whose rich natural resources would be at the disposal of multinational corporations, whose populations would work at subsistence wages, whose economy offered no competition with existing capitalist producers, only new investment opportunities. They wanted a Yugoslavia whose petroleum, engineering, mining, and automotive industries would be undone and deindustrialized. And they wanted to abolish Yugoslavia's public sector services and social programs.
And they did it. Furthermore, the harmony that the people of Yugoslavia had been building for the greater good was crushed. It is a stereotype that the hatred between the population in Yugoslavia was always there. The South Slavs traveled together to arrive in these lands from the north and found their piece of heaven around the 6th century. Hatred was later manufactured by greater powers, who saw it appropriate to teach the Slavs how to be civilized and democratic.
Trust me.
Consider that for the better part of the 20th century, black people weren't even allowed to sit at the front of the bus in the US, while the Dubrovnik Republic actually abolished slavery back in 1642, when the US was still a British colony and didn't...
Brap. Bruv.
Yeah.
That is... I don't even know how to react to that.
Bruv, you don't need to. No words need to be said. You get me?
I'm speechless, bro.
He just laid it out.
In these lands from the north and found their piece of heaven around the 6th century. Hatred was later manufactured by greater powers, who saw it appropriate to teach the Slavs how to be civilized and democratic. Consider that for the better part of the 20th century, black people weren't even allowed to sit at the front of the bus in the US, while the Dubrovnik Republic actually abolished slavery back in 1642.
Every time I hear it, it's just laughable. Like America, man. Not the powers, the evil powers in America.
When the US was still a British colony and didn't exist as a country. The Western hypocrisy was obvious.
Hypocrisy.
Why would a Croat really hate a Serb or a Serb hate a Muslim? Because of what someone somewhere did and who knows when? Because of what TV says? Hasn't history shown that these people were in fact able to live together? Or is this all irrelevant the moment someone starts arguing about who did what to whom how many times worse?
To živiš neprekidno u nekoj mržnji? Da li živiš u nekom neprekidnom strahu iza sebe ili nekog jednostavno toliko mrziš da ti se sva tvoja pozitivna energija bazira na tome da to prepoznaš, razlikuješ i da nekom iracionalnom silom manifestuješ tu svoju mržnju. Od toga se ne živi. Od toga žive bolesnici.
There is no such thing as biological hatred, that a certain group is predestined to hate another. Anyone who says any different has an agenda. Trust me. I know what you're gonna say. Boris, all you do is criticize without offering a solution. Well, for the solution, all you need to do is look at the stories of those who said no to this madness, who decide to act as human beings during inhuman times.
Kad se čovjek makne ispod kišobrana kolektiviteta koji ga gura prema zlu, može biti plemenit i hrabar.
Da su ljudi bili i da je bilo većina onih koji su razmišljali kao moj suprug, naravno da do rata ne bi došlo.
Corrupt politicians, army generals, or war profiteers were to blame for the colonization of Yugoslavia just as much as the colonists from the West.
Nobody could have done this to us if we were not as weak as we are in defining ourselves and defending our own history. If we, as a nation, stand up, no one can keep us down. There is no cruise missile, there is no imperial power, there is no spying network, there is no media domination that can crush our people.
Yugoslavs must become aware that their countries are Western colonies, victims of rampant and merciless globalization, bound by economic, social, and political chains.
No, it's mad. I'm so glad I watched this.
Yeah, real talk, brother. It's been a real eye-opener.
The land of the South Slavs, whatever you call it, has great potential shared by some of the most diverse and enigmatic people in the world. The East thought they were the West. The West considered them the East. Some of them misunderstood their place in the clash of currents, so outside powers exploited them for centuries. Enough.
Dosta!
Rappity brap!
Wait, hold on. Yeah, big up Boris Malagurski.
Yeah, you know who that is, boy.
Bruv, we haven't heard this song, but we know who it is, innit?
Yeah, big up to Kerr as well, man. All the man them that lost their life in the line of duty, bro.
Trust me.
You know? So yeah, no, I was just saying, you see all the man that like said no to the corruption and they lost their lives first and foremost, we have to pick them up.
Yeah, we have to pick them up.
If you think about it, right, is they're the reason why today you've got guys like us who love and want to know and be a part of everything the Balkans is. You know what I mean?
And like what the guy said, look what happened to anyone who wanted collectivity and unity. They ended up dying.
Yeah.
And being punished for wanting something positive. So, man, the proof's in the pudding, man. And that was a banging ending. That was a banging way to summarize it. I like how they did it in chronological order like that.
I mean, this documentary was so insightful because, you know, I always knew of the war in what was called Yugoslavia, but I never knew the extent as to how it happened and how from one region you ended up getting so many different countries. Like, it always baffled me.
And it's the positive to know that it wasn't yourselves that caused the divide. It was an outside external force and evil that planted that seed. And then obviously once the seed was planted, unknowingly it had to grow, innit? So
yeah, the cost of so many lives. But anyway, obviously this isn't this channel is not a political channel. Now you see, our generation, I believe our generation, especially in the Balkans now, needs to work towards unity and mending those fractured relationships with other countries, you know?
Yes, guys, so big up for that one. That one was heavily requested, so we had to do it. The next documentary we want to do some Pravi Rep documentary. So I know there's a Smoke Mardeliano documentary. We'll do that one next. And if there's any other ones, so we want to steer back to music now. And we got videos and lots of stuff coming your way. But yeah, over Skonson Productions. Catch you on the next one. Blow.